Cheers. Welcome to Culture Night,
where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
I'm Sarah.
Trying to steal my line there.
I am trying to steal your line. I'm just so excited to be back for episode 8. Thank you to everybody who's listening again on all the podcast platforms, or if you're sitting down and watching us on YouTube. We appreciate all the views, all the feedback, all the things.
Yeah. So, let's jump into some podcast business. First off, people on
YouTube.
Sorry. I had this written down that you should be covering this.
I know I thought you were leading me in, so I was just going with you. But
yeah, so we got some headphones, so we can finally monitor our own levels.
Yes, I am 10 out of 10 excited to have headphones. Ever since we switched to our fancier setup with the mics and the Rodecaster, we couldn't tell how loud we were recording at, and so that made the editing process really difficult because I would go in afterwards and we would have moved farther away from the microphone, or we were too close, and trying to edit it was just a pain. So now we should be able to better monitor our levels while we're recording.
We'd kind of drift too far, and then suddenly I'd get excited and start like kind of clipping. So now I can kind of move myself in and out as I get really excited, and then kind of come back in.
We're just so enthusiastic about these movies. We can't control ourselves.
Yeah. But also we finally got our first comments on YouTube.
Thank you to the one person that commented.
Yeah. Got some feedback. So we record these a week in advance. So when this comes out, this will be, I guess, 2 weeks. In the past, we got the comments, but that was on our Young Frankenstein video. Got some awesome context on the history about Young Frankenstein and the other movies that it was based on. Besides just the one Frankenstein movie, there was Bride of Frankenstein and Son of Frankenstein. So we'll have to go back and watch those and see, if that affects how we view the movie.
For sure. It's definitely on our list.
Mm-hmm.
And also along the lines of YouTube and social media, we've started posting more on, we've started doing reels on Instagram and posting shorts on YouTube so that we can show a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff of what we do before we start the podcast, especially with like our wine. And now that we've got a fancier setup, just kind of some of that stuff. So if you are enjoying those reels, give them a like or a comment if that you want to see other things or have any other questions or any feedback for us about the podcast.
Yeah, appreciate the feedback, and obviously love the trivia and everything, but also if people have questions or suggestions, love to have those. And we're also going to be trying out the official podcast support on YouTube Music. Hope to get that running, hopefully by the time this is out, that we have that listed on there. And so then there'll be one more platform that we are on so that people can consume this wherever they are.
Yeah, it's been on my to-do list for a week or two to look into YouTube podcasts, but we got a lot going on.
Yeah. Well, it's only been out for like a week, so I think
we're letting everybody else figure out all the bugs and tweaks, and then we'll jump in.
Exactly.
Strategy. All right, so jumping into our slept on it, thinking back a little bit to last week's movie of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Has your rating changed at all since we watched last week?
I don't think so. I think I rated it fairly highly, and I thought about it a lot this past week, and I still really, really enjoyed it. Although one of my friends texted me when he saw that we were watching it and said that his favorite theory was that if you took Indiana Jones completely out of the movie, it still ends up with a bunch of Nazis stealing the Ark and getting their faces melted off. So
very true.
It's kind of like, what purpose did he really, serve there? But
making it all a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, and at least he got it into the hands of the government so they could bury it deep underground, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My rating stays the same. I think I was at like a 6.8, 6.9, and I still feel pretty good about that. The story was interesting. It was a little long.
Yeah.
It was exciting, and again, I think I also liked it a lot because it was a switch up from what we have been watching. Something different. A lot of
fun stunts and action and stuff like that. So, but speaking of the stunts, I did a little bit of research, and I did confirm that the scene where Indiana Jones fought the swordsman and ended up just shooting him, it was because Harrison Ford had dysentery and couldn't leave his trailer for more than 10 minutes. And he said that they had been practicing the stunts and everything, but he just felt so bad that he ended up just saying, this is our last scene we need to shoot before we leave Tunisia and head back to England. I can't do it. I'm just going to shoot the guy. And says he felt really bad for the stuntman because he was apparently like a really big swordsman. It was supposed to be this big, sword versus the whip, drawn out fight. But it kind of, became a more iconic scene where it's just like a kind of a little comedic break there. So,
that's such an interesting fact. I'm glad that you even knew to look into that, because I don't know that I really would have thought twice about it, especially I think coming off of those comedy movies where, I feel like that would have been something we would have seen in some of the movies we'd seen previously. That,
and then probably like a singing number.
Gotta have those musicals in the 70s.
And then the other thing I looked at was the flying water plane, whatever, that he flew across the Pacific. And apparently those were like a big thing. So they were big in like the 30s and 40s. And I think it was like after World War I, the idea was that they were essentially a boat that could fly. And so they were made, from the research I gathered, that they were made for like, flying across, for World War I and being able to, take off and leave without, runways. But by the time that they were kind of built and all that, there were actually like runways most places. So they weren't really super necessary. So they kind of converted them to be these super luxury, high end, like essentially like the flight from San Francisco to Hawaii took like 19 hours. So it was like a really big luxury, over the top, like very wealthy. You're gonna have plenty of room to get up and move around and just be, treated really, really well. But I think that once they, I think it was just super impractical to kind of keep that. And air travel has obviously gone to more like how many people can we squeeze onto these planes. So that kind of, I guess, did away with that concept. But apparently the actual plane that they used in the movie wasn't made until the 40s. So they had to kind of retrofit it to look like it was one of the models that was made in the 30s. And it actually wasn't seaworthy. And so the scene where they are boarding the plane on the water, it's like not actually in the water. I think it was like CGI, not CGI, but maybe some sort of special effects to make it look like it's actually on the water there. So I kind of want to go back and see if I can like look at it and notice if it actually is fake there. But
yeah, it was very interesting because I was so caught off guard just watching it, seeing the plane in the water, and then he goes inside and it's actually this like really nice looking plane that it's interesting that they were designed to be this luxury style.
It was like supposed to be kind of like a boat, but I think kind of the same concept of what blimps were for these big airships that were kind of, I guess, still kind of taking on the vibe of the big luxury liners like the Titanic of that time, and kind of translating that to the air, but obviously super impractical to do long-term because of just the amount of fuel it took to do that.
That makes sense. We're so conscious of our fossil fuel use, aren't we?
Yeah, nowadays.
All right. So do you have anything else on the movie?
That was all that I looked up.
Yeah. We enjoyed it, and now we're ready to move on to tonight. So tonight we are drinking Tobin James, our absolute favorite, the Silver Reserve Lagrange from 2017.
Nice.
I don't really know a whole lot about Lagrange. I know we've had them a couple times.
Is that the one that we did like a taste test with a bunch of them before?
Yeah. We are wine club members at Tobin James, so we get 2 shipments a year of about 8 bottles per box, and probably like 2 or 3 years ago, we realized that we had a bottle from like 2013, 2014, 2015 or something like that. So we decided to go all scientific method and open up 3 bottles at the same time and taste test them all and see if we could taste the difference. And
surprisingly, there was a difference between it that we could really kind of pick up on. And I think we definitely rated which ones we liked the most. I don't know if we wrote down like our results.
Yeah, I don't know if we weren't as good at documenting.
Yeah, you had that like wine notebook. I don't know if we wrote it down in that, but
yeah, we weren't as good at documenting things then as we are now. But definitely something that's fun to do. And I think we did a wine tasting in Napa Valley one time that was a bunch of the same grape from different vineyards
from the same year, made the same way. Yeah,
and so I think that kind of opened our eyes up to trying wine in different ways and kind of comparing things like that and seeing if we can taste the difference. So I don't know about you, but I'm ready to give it a quick taste.
It smells very alcohol forward.
I also almost got like some like wood chip, like hickory, like on the after.
I don't know. I feel like I just burned all my my nostrils with the alcohol forwardness of the first big whiff.
It's more complex than I thought it was going to be on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
The taste is more complex.
Yeah, it's more like viscous, I guess, than I thought it would be.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It tastes very robust.
It definitely is alcohol forward in the taste, but it has like a more complex aftertaste.
Yeah, I don't even know how to describe what that aftertaste is. It's almost like just a little bit of spice and... Try to think.
I don't know. I think it kind of tastes like a campfire in all the best ways of a campfire.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
as silly as that feels to describe it. Just
it's not like even a smoky flavor. It's just, very, very campfire-y.
Ashy.
Yeah, but there's a little bit of tartness, I guess. Not sour, but like tart to it. So
yeah. So far, I'm pleasantly surprised.
Pretty good.
Yep. All right. And what are we watching tonight?
Tonight we are watching Top Gun from 1986.
So we're really like deep in the 80s now. We just hopped over a little bit into this decade. Now we're right smack in the middle.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch this one because there's obviously been a lot of talks about the new Top Gun, but I kind of wanted to go back and watch this before watching the new one, obviously.
Have you seen this one before?
I have. Probably at most 3 times. It's been several years since I saw it. But I do have a general, good memory of it. But it's interesting because I feel like since I've watched it last, one of my good friends became a naval aviator. And so I kind of have like more of an idea of like what all that somewhat entails. Obviously I wasn't at the school with him, but it'll be interesting knowing like that he taught also, it was an instructor at one of these flight schools, not Top Gun, but just kind of keeping that in mind as I'm watching some of this.
It's interesting. I hadn't even thought about that. I mean, not that I know as much like from him as you do, but
because Top Gun is like a real flight school.
Very cool. Yeah, I have not seen it before. At least I don't think I have. And I mean, I know Tom Cruise and flying and aviators and like the big picture stuff of it, but nothing too specific about it. So I'm excited.
Yeah. As far as the rating, it is rated PG. Really? PG? Interesting.
Apparently what we thought PG was is not what PG is.
Yeah. I mean, I'll obviously watch it and look out for things that I think would make it rated PG-13 today, but I just feel like nowadays, even just a little bit of like the fact there's a gun or anything remotely intense.
Or cigarettes. That's a quick PG.
Yeah.
But it said, I looked it up and it said that it is rated PG for action sequences, language, and some sexual content.
Ooh.
So I think sexual content in 2023 is a definite PG-13.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to see any boobs or anything, but I think it'll probably be a little bit like maybe a heavy kiss.
Probably.
We'll see.
Yeah. we'll have to look out for that and see what PG sexual content actually is.
80s, yeah. So for the just kind of set the stage of the sign of the times, the top 3 movies released that year, 1986. Number 1 was Top Gun at 176 million in I guess box office revenue. Crocodile Dundee at 116 million. That's a good one. I don't think you've probably seen that, have you?
Nope.
We can add that to the list. And The Karate Kid Part 2, just narrowly behind that at 115 million. And the top 3 songs released that year were That's What Friends Are For by
Dion and Friends. Dionne Warwick. Okay. And then there was a bunch of other people.
Okay. Say You, Say Me by Lionel Richie. And I Miss You by Climax.
I know. Yeah.
It's just funny because it's spelled with KLYMAXXX. Just a very aggressive spelling of.
I believe it's 3 X's. I might have typoed the third one, but it was definitely, it wasn't until I was typing it out that I realized what the word actually was, because I just was like looking at it, glance, researching it, and was like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, I really want to listen to it now.
Yeah, we really need to start doing that. Is actually like listening to these songs to really get us in the mood. But we've kind of already talked about whether we've seen it and what we know about it. So I don't know about you, but I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. Top Gun.
that was quite a wild ride.
Are you still coming down from that a little bit?
There was just a lot of testosterone in that one.
That is exactly it. Oh my God.
Whew.
So we're going to jump in with your wine scale. Or your wine rating based on our wine scale of good wines.
I'm going to go a 6.2.
Okay. I'm going to go 7.
A 7.
And I surprised myself with that. And I think a lot of that is based on, we've been drinking a lot of wines.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would probably shift some of the ones we've had before now that we've had a lot in the last, 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But I really liked it.
It grew on me. So the first couple sips, like I said, were very alcohol forward, very tart. I wasn't getting too much from it, but as it went on, it definitely, I got a little bit of raspberry, and then by the end of it, I was tasting a lot of like actual. I guess it was more like the artificial strawberry flavor, like a little bit, but it definitely changed over time.
For sure. Yeah.
Which I feel like is a sign of a good wine, right?
Sure. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, thinking back, I think the best wine that personally I think we've had this whole time has been the 5, which I think I maybe gave like just under a 7. And I think I'd bump that up having had a lot of really nice wines lately. But I don't know. Just something about this one was really
Didn't we
good.
have a Cab Franc, though?
I don't think we've done Cab Franc.
Cab
Have we? Oh, maybe we have.
Well, no, I guess we had. I think the 5 had Cab Franc in it. Is probably what I'm thinking about.
Maybe we've got to have a running list of the wines we've had too, because
Yeah,
it's really hard to keep them all straight.
Yeah. I mean, I liked this, I think, better than the last week's.
Yes, me too.
It definitely, at the beginning, I was like, I'm not sure how I'm feeling about this, but when it aired out a little bit, in the alcohol flavoring kind of wafted away. It was very delightful.
Yeah, it was delish. Another great wine. So now movie. Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
You can go first.
I'm also going to give this one a 7. I'm just feeling flat 7s across the board. Under 7 for this feels like not enough, and over 7 feels like too much, but just like a right at 7, I really enjoyed it. And I don't know, it kind of gives me similar vibes to a lot of the like space movies that we've kind of been into over the last couple of years, and that or also like For All Mankind on Apple TV, like those like military based, like science based things. I definitely
felt the vibes of the of For All Mankind, whereas a little bit of that stress and just a lot of like action and those
like,
kind of sequences of.
And this is like a flight school and astronaut school and just that similar vibe that I don't know. It just
definitely
it was good for me. I really liked it.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it an 8 flat. I kind of hovered as I was thinking about it throughout, and
man, I thought my 7 was bold, but
well, it was a lot of fun.
Judging by your dance moves on the outro song on the credits,
the soundtrack
definitely
was
loved it.
Bangers only. That was fantastic. I mean, I've rocked out to that soundtrack driving the Camaro, windows down. It's summer, just perfect soundtrack for just finding some open road, flooring it safely. But I got a lot of those flashbacks, like just listening to the soundtrack during the movie. That definitely helped, and I feel like. I had this in my notes. I was talk about it there, but I can talk about it now. It was very much felt like a very 80s rock, like action soundtrack with like a little bit of the love ballad kind of vibe in there. That I felt really just meshed very well with the movie. And I liked there was a lot of action. I would have rated it higher, probably if I'd watched it when it came out. But there was so much of a lot of the plane like action shots. I don't know. It kept cutting back and forth between like, showing these crazy maneuvers and all that, and then back and forth. It kind of felt like it was a lot of those were longer than they needed to be. Those scenes,
yes,
kind of distracted from my score. A little bit.
Those lost my attention span for sure.
Some of the acting parts were pretty terrible, especially by. I thought Meg Ryan's character was just not great. I don't know if she had more and they cut that later, but it just was not very great. Some of those things kind of detracted from the overall score, but it was very fun to watch.
Yeah, I felt like excitement the whole time. I really did enjoy this movie, and not that I wasn't expecting to enjoy it, but I think it kind of caught me off guard with how much I enjoyed it. That helped boost my score up more too. It was like, oh man, this is like really interesting, and I'm really into it. I think it also, as a girl, like the testosterone was just like exploding out of this movie, but it did have a little bit of the like romance. And not that that's something I always need in a movie, but it was something to kind of just at least balance it out a little bit, because it was a lot.
It did feel a little forced, the whole
For sure.
love angle from it, that I think nowadays isn't quite as essential in some of the newer movies. But I feel like I need a chart of like my rating over the time of the movie, because a lot of times I
kind of like the ESPN like win prediction score of like, what's my movie prediction throughout the duration of the movie.
Yeah, I think sometimes I'm really liking it, and then sometimes some things like drag on, or some jokes are hammered in the ground in some movies where by the end of it, I'm just like, I just kind of need them to move on from this or do something else or end the movie. And not that this one went way too long or anything. It just, I feel like my score probably peaked around like an 8.3. That it probably ended up around like an 8.
Yeah, I try to check in with myself a couple times during the movie to like see how I'm feeling, just so I can kind of take those numbers throughout the movie.
I mean, soundtrack was great. Quotability was great. It was fun to watch. But I thought some of the acting wasn't fantastic, and just kind of felt like a lot of the action scenes felt very repetitive, and just a lot of like flashiness, where if I was like, 12, 8, like I would have loved all those crazy like action shots of the planes. But by the end of it, I was kind of like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So you want to give us your description?
Sure. Maverick, played by Tom Cruise, is a very risky pilot as a naval aviator, and he is able to work his way into Top Gun because someone else essentially like can't handle the pressures of being a pilot, and that is apparently a 5-week program where he competes against the best pilots for some sort of like, I don't know, badge, pat on the back or something.
Get your name on the plaque.
Sure. He competes in a whole bunch of like drills and tests, and his I guess partner in some sort of accident during one of the drills dies when he's ejected and doesn't eject cleanly, and he takes some time to kind of recover from that, but eventually everyone respects how great of a pilot he is, and he's eventually thrust into some super high stakes mission and snaps out of it by the end and saves the day.
Wonderful. The description based on our TV, wherever this is pulling this from, says, for Lieutenant Pete Maverick Mitchell and his friend and co-pilot Nick Goose Bradshaw, being accepted into an elite training school for fighter pilots is a dream come true, but a tragedy as well as personal demons will threaten Pete's dreams of becoming an ace pilot. Dun, dun, that's absolutely the sound effect you need for after that. One day I will actually program the Rodecaster with good sounds and know where they are to be able to throw those in there.
Yeah, that very much felt like an ominous kind of like lead off
ominous.
To the end of that one. But yeah,
that about sounds
surprised that the I guess the Rotten Tomatoes score is only a 58. I feel like it's much more well respected and well reviewed.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. No, I won't jump ahead.
Yeah,
we'll come back to that. Was the movie what you expected? You'd seen it before.
Yeah.
It was what you expected. It was exactly what I expected. A bunch of dudes flying planes.
Did you, before I said that Top Gun was a flight school, did you expect it to be a flight school, or did you expect it to be a lot more like actual action combat?
I guess I expected more combat. I didn't really know what the setting of it was.
I probably should have asked you this beforehand, or shouldn't have like given that away beforehand. Because I feel like if you don't know that Top Gun is a flight school, you just think like
I did not know it was a
gun.
school.
Like who's the best gunner, and like it's a bit different than that.
Yeah, I didn't really know the circumstances of it. I mean, I knew planes, military, dudes.
Yeah. So how well did it age / could this movie be made today?
Oh, just like last week, I'm going to say yes and yes. Aged well. Could be made today. They remade it about 3 or 4 months
I don't
ago.
think it's necessarily a remake. It's more like a sequel.
It's a sequel.
To it.
But this exact script, whole thing, I feel like you could exactly make today.
Yeah, and this is also like not a movie that is supposed to take place in like a modern time. It takes place like in a specific era, like the Cold War. That very much fits it. I thought the special effects were fine. I didn't think there was anything that looked like too fake. A lot of it, I imagine, based on the ending credits, was just a lot of actual naval aviators flying around doing all of those clips.
That's what I was thinking a lot during it. It felt like they filmed almost all of this for real, and it was not a lot of like CGI. I mean, obviously not CGI, but
I want to talk about one of the notes that I had was that I feel like nowadays, if they were to actually remake this, a lot of this could be made by Storyblocks, not a sponsor. There's a lot of like B-roll clips of just like, you know, a bunch of planes rolling out and flying around and doing all these like B-roll looking shots. But I do wonder if, knowing Tom Cruise for who he is today, if he insisted on like learning how to fly a plane and be like, I want to fly my shots. And they were like, sure. And maybe got like one clip of it, or if this was before he decided to do all of his own stunts.
I don't know. Watching this from 1986, I just
seems to
no
before
way.
He had the authority to say, I'm going to do all my own stunts.
Oh, for sure.
I'm sure in the new one he probably was like, I'm going to fly my own fighter jet.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
He's Tom Cruise. There's no way they'd let him do that.
Did they say the title of the movie in the movie?
Yeah, I mean, it's the name of the school.
Yeah.
But it was not in the cheesy way that a lot of these older movies
you think
do
you're
it.
the Top Gun here?
It did not feel as cringy and gross as that is in a lot of movies.
They didn't force it a lot. It's more like in the beginning, I think they said it like, you're going to Top Gun, and they didn't refer to it then as the school. So
it is very much said as needed.
Were there any actors that went on to do bigger things?
I mean, there are a lot of big names in this. Obviously, Tom Cruise and Meg Ryan. Goose was one of the main doctors in ER.
Dr. Green.
And
it's like one of the few that I remember from ER. Not that I really watched it, but I just remember like him.
I did not recognize him based on his 1986 appearance. It was not until I did the Google search that I put it together.
Yep,
and I had to really look at it to put it together. But
yeah,
I do remember him from the show. Not that I watched a whole lot of the show, but I watched a lot of the show. I did not pay attention to a lot of the show because we were so young when it was on, but I definitely recognized him for sure.
Yeah, I looked at him and was like, he looks so familiar. Where do I know him from? And I saw that, and I don't think that's necessarily where I know him from. I'll see if he was in anything else that I know. But yeah, I definitely do know that he was in that. The guy from Free Willy, I think his name's Michael Ironside. I just know him as the villain from Free Willy because I grew up on that movie. Was I think Jester, one of the instructors. Meg Ryan, you said Goose, and Tim Robbins was his partner at the very end for like a split second, and this must have been before like all of his rise to fame in Shawshank Redemption, because it was a very, very minor role that you could have put anyone almost in there. So I don't even think he really says much, and when he does, he has the mask over top of himself. But there were a lot of future stars, I guess, in this. What do we have next?
What impact do you think this movie had on pop culture?
So in my notes, I noted down that this felt like it influenced Talladega Nights to an extent. I don't know how familiar you are with the plot of it, where Ricky Bobby,
I've seen Talladega Nights many, many times.
Gets into an accident, like he's afraid to like drive again, and his especially the ending scene of Talladega Nights where John C. Reilly is like talking to him from the other car. It felt very much like kind of the back and forth of like, we're talking over the radio on this, and you just got to go for it, and the slingshot, and like all of those things felt like it kind of, I don't know if it was influenced directly by this or if this was also just kind of another part of that vibe.
General action.
But it felt kind of like Talladega Nights to an extent was making fun of Top Gun, where it's like, oh, had an accident, can't drive, can't go fast anymore, and he can't really fly anymore. He's too afraid to take a shot, and then his friend's still there, and
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I kind of see it. It did not stick out to me while watching the movie, but very interesting.
So just as something that it might have influenced, but obviously everyone knows Top Gun, and it's just kind of like the 80s, like male, like testosterone.
I mean, that was the one where that just kept coming to me. The entire movie was just testosterone. I mean, it just like oozes from this movie.
Yeah.
So much.
Just a bunch of like sweaty guys trying to prove that they're the manliest. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not like a crazy girly girl, but watching this, I'm like, dudes are something different. This, I identify with this on no level. Like, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit different than I'm sure that like most girls like experience like with like, competition or anything. It was definitely felt like it was exaggerated, but also very much like just guys being
guys.
Yeah. What do we have next is, do you feel cultured after watching it?
100%. And not that I feel like it's referenced a whole lot in the way that like Risky Business was with his like underwear scene or like Mrs. Robinson and stuff like that. But you hear of the movie a lot, and obviously Tom Cruise is a big superstar, so there's a lot of reference back to this. Also, the sequel just came out recently that you've been hearing about it even more, but I've definitely heard about it my whole life, so I'm glad I've seen it. And I still really enjoyed it. I really liked it.
Yeah.
It was really good.
I don't know if you had any like scenes that you associated with Top Gun before you'd seen this at all, but I think some of the iconic scenes were doing the upside down flyover of the MiG.
None of the flying scenes were something
in the very beginning
that sticks out to me.
And obviously they say Top Gun and talk about that in the very beginning, but I don't know if this necessarily continues our streak of like the iconic scene happening in the first.
I did think about that during it. I was like, I feel like there was no iconic scene for me where it was like, oh, that happened right away. I feel like if anything, it was like when after they do one of those big flight scenes, them walking out away from the planes with all their like gear and stuff. That's kind of what I imagine or think of when I think of the movie, but I don't have like a specific scene or anything in particular that I've.
Yeah, I think the beach volleyball scene is one of the main also scenes they talk about, and that was very far into the movie. So
I had never heard of that.
We can say we've broken our streak of like all of the iconic scenes happening in the first 5 minutes of the movie.
True. Can I go first?
Sure.
I'm feeling really amped up. I really enjoyed this movie. I know our ratings mine was lower than yours, but I very much really liked this.
Yeah, let's hear your notes.
I think we've kind of talked about this a couple times of how the way movies start has really changed, where we don't have the credits at the beginning of the movie anymore. But I really, really enjoyed it in this one, where it was, telling all the actors and all that stuff, which sometimes it's nice to have a surprise that someone's going to be in a movie. But just like setting up the boat that they were all on, and all the different jobs of all the people that have to do like different things with the planes and all of that kind of stuff. And I love how that just really set the scene of where we were and what this movie was about. And I feel like that's such an important part of a lot of movies that we don't get as much with it, because we save all the credits till the end, and there's not as much of that like setting the scene type stuff.
I definitely prefer this method versus some movies that just have like a static image with names, like especially the really older movies where it's just like some song playing
over like a landscape shot or something.
Yeah, and that's boring. This really, you see a bunch of the planes taking off. You get a feel for like the atmosphere of the ship, and just seeing how intense it is to fly and take off and land on that.
The like emotion behind a lot of that, and how much like everything is very down to like the wire of how exact you have to be on all the jobs that you're doing. That I just feel like I took a lot from that in that opening scene. So I guess episode 3, I think we watched Risky Business. So this just is our first like repeat big. I mean, I guess we did the Mel Brooks, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein.
True.
But that was kind of in a similar universe where they kind of all stayed together. This was just another Tom Cruise movie. I don't think there's any repeat actors between Risky Business and this. But it came out 3 years after Risky Business.
Only 3.
Right?
Wow.
Like at first I was like, oh man, he's aged so much from Risky Business. But the more I watched it, I was like, he just still feels like he's very little. And like a lot younger than everybody else in the movie. Yeah,
because he's supposed to be like a high school senior going into college. And here he should have been graduated from college and like in flight school, which I guess is only 4 to 5 years, and it's been 3 years since then. I don't know. It just seems like he did still look pretty young in this, but surprising that was only, wow.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I had a note. He still looks like a baby, but my biggest takeaway were his eyebrows. And I think, I noticed eyebrow. Yes. I'm sorry. Singular. And I noticed it right away. I don't know how it took you so long to notice it, because you finally said something like a good way in the movie, because they're wearing the helmets and all you see are his eyes. And I could just see just the one going all the way across.
Well, every time they show the helmets, I would
clean that up a little bit.
When they would show them in the plane, I kept looking at the mask to think, why are they wearing it sometimes and not others?
Yes,
and
I did spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's like not super comfortable, that if you're not at high enough altitude, you don't necessarily need to wear it. But I kept looking at it, being like, oh, his is on, his is off, his is on, his. I wasn't looking at the eyebrow.
Yeah,
for a while.
That's all I could see at first. And then
I think they would have had like someone in makeup be like, right, so we're gonna do a quick wax,
just
on
like
this.
a quick It takes a second to get that center part. Just clean up a little bit. And I'm okay with it being like really full, like big Sandy Cohen, Peter Gallagher eyebrows, but it was a lot. It was certainly a look. And then my next note is this really leaned into my anxiety of flying. We travel a lot. We fly a lot on airplanes. I do not love it. It gives me a lot of stress. And they are risky. risky business, risky flyers. And what does Val Kilmer say? Like, you're dangerous or whatever. And it just really, it got me in that same way that like flying on a plane makes me nervous. But this was obviously like way more extreme, and I could never do it. I could not do it.
Most planes we take don't fly like that, and there's usually not a MiG on our trail, but
but it's still just, it gave me that like very similar feeling of being on a plane and just like all the things that could go wrong and all of that stuff.
The only time I felt really stressed by that was when they're landing on the aircraft carrier, because I'm like, if you just mess that up just a little bit, you're killing hundreds of
Especially
people.
when like Cougar's plane was coming in and he was rocking side to side. I was like, oh my God.
If you're a little bit over to the side, and you could really just destroy that entire plane.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying. But I almost felt like the aircraft carrier should have like a responsibility to be like, if he's coming in and he looks like he's not going to land safely, take him out, because losing 2 people in a $30 million plane, as awful as it is better than losing an entire aircraft carrier and all the people on it. And
also, along with the anxiety, was the motion sickness. Just watching that first scene with Cougar and all of that, I was like, I'm not built for this.
Yeah. Especially on such a large screen, just kind of like it really rocking around.
Yeah, not a fan. So this is a note, but also a question. If you had to have a call sign like all of the dudes, do you have one that would come to mind?
I don't know how much of the call sign, I'm trying to remember, like from my friend, if you choose that as much as it's also, sometimes it's just given to you.
I assume a lot of it's given to you. But if you had to choose one for yourself.
Yeah. If I had to choose one for myself, I would probably choose Tonka.
I know. I was like, oh, I have this great question. And then all of a sudden halfway through, I was like, oh, he'd probably just choose Tonka.
If one was given to me, oh man, I don't know.
You can sleep on it or think about it.
I'll see if I could think about it, but
I just felt like that was a good hot seat question.
I mean, technically, the nickname Tonka was given to me. I didn't,
and
choose
that's what
that
I
one,
figured.
So I'm going to go ahead and say that's my call sign.
Yeah, I mean, I spent the whole movie thinking about this, and I don't really have one for myself off the top of my head, but I just know that a lot of them like Iceman and Maverick. I'm like, I'm not one of those bold people. I'd be something more like Goose. Like just
so you're a silly goose.
That's the inner parent talking right there. But yeah, I'm not bold or brave enough to be something like Viper. So we can think about that for next week too. Just sit on it for a little bit. And then, so I know we talked about before about how tall Tom Cruise is, that he's 5'7", and I felt like I paid a lot more attention to like the actors around him and how they had the actress who played Charlie was. I believe she said she was 5'10", so she's 3 inches taller than him. So there was a lot of scenes where she was sitting and he was standing and those kinds of things. But then
I guess that makes sense. I was wondering why he was standing and she was laying on the couch. It was so awkward. Like,
yeah, it's because she's 3 inches taller than him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But my note was, how short is the man in charge? When right after Cougar turned in his wings and they were like getting told they were going to Top Gun. Tom Cruise is standing, and I don't know if he was standing on something, but whoever this colonel, lieutenant, I don't really know the structure of the military, man in charge was talking to them, and he looked significantly shorter than Tom Cruise. That I'm like, are you what, like 5'3", 5'4", 5'5"? I
mean, I know that a lot of times he stands on like an apple box, and
I kind of figured he was standing something.
If you can't see his feet, you gotta
Goose is 6'2", so I assume he was Tom Cruise was probably standing on something, but it makes you look at it differently when you know how short he is and how tall, like to have the perspective of how tall other people are. And then, so this is something, I'm just making a quick note of it now. I'm going to do a deep dive on aviators, the sunglasses for next week. And just like, which came first? The fact that all aviation pilots wear them, or
I think
the
it's gotta
glasses
be a
come
practical
first.
reason to really kind of show that you got something smaller. Like, I feel like the size.
Is there a reason that they all wear them? Like, I feel like there's a little something there. So I'm gonna deep dive that for next week because I mean, it's a good look, but I want to learn a little bit more about those. And so you mentioned this during the movie when Tom Cruise starts singing to Charlie in the bar. As a girl, I would just walk right out. You would get like 4 notes into the song and I'd be like, this is 0% what I ever would want in someone trying to hit on me. Even if it was you and we're married and I love you. Nope. I would just be like, I'm not going to sit here and let the entire bar start singing to me. Absolutely not. I'd walk right out.
Yeah, especially feel bad because she was just by herself.
Yeah.
I will say back in college, me and a group of guys reenacted that entire scene a couple times in bars. And
Did it work?
I was about to say, I don't remember. because we'd obviously been drinking a lot. It's not something you do at the beginning of the night. It's more like you would be having a lot of drinks, and someone would just point out that she had lost that love and feeling, and you'd say, "Damn it, I hate it when she does that." And yeah,
I appreciate the brotherhood aspect of that, but
we had like 12 guys. It wasn't just like 3. You know, it was a lot. I couldn't tell you if it worked at all or if it was just kind of a.
Yeah. No.
But also when you got that many
it would
guys
not work on me. So
all committed to it, you don't really care whether it works or not. It was just kind of fun to all sing.
God, all those poor girls. I'm so sorry. And then, so we have a 3-month-old child. So I've spent a lot of time like in the last year looking at baby names and reading discussion boards on all the different like pregnancy apps and stuff. And a really hot and popular name right now is Maverick.
Because of the movie?
And
sequel.
A lot of people would comment on that. And like, I hadn't seen this movie until today. So I really didn't have a lot of context over the last year. Obviously we've named our kid for a while. Like I have not been looking at them recently, but I just love that he tells Charlie that his name is Maverick. And her comment is, does your mother hate you? Like her automatic response. And I'm like, oh my God, but like, it's a really popular name.
I went to high school with a boy named Maverick, and I don't know if that was his actual name or I'm pretty sure it was his name. I'm pretty sure that's what it was in the yearbook. And he was not cool. Like it was almost like his parents loved the movie and he hated everything about it. I'm surprised he didn't like change his name because he did not fit the name Maverick at all.
And that's what, like, you know, you're a parent, you can name your kid what you want. But with something like Maverick, like these really strong masculine or like really strong feminine names, you're kind of like pigeonholing your kid into being like a certain kind of person, and you can't control that as a parent. Like you have zero control over that. And if you have just like a kid that is not like a big, strong, bulky dude and you name him Maverick,
you are preaching to the choir.
It just feels like a bold move. But I had to giggle and point that out because...
Yeah,
I wrote it down. Her exact quote was, "Did your mother not like you?" And I'm like, oh my God, all these mothers out there naming their kids Maverick.
Yeah, and I just feel
obviously that's not his real name.
Forcing them into like something very particular of like, you're going to be like this, you're gonna have this personality, or you're forcing them to go by a nickname the rest of their life, or to change their name as soon as they legally can.
Yeah, so just throwing in some personal cultural stuff that's had to share that. So I have a note in here about Goose. First of all, I was not prepared for him to die.
I obviously knew that was coming, and I knew you were getting real attached. I felt bad.
Oh God. Okay, but I like wrote the note because the first like 30 minutes, I was like, he reminds me of somebody. Like he absolutely reminds me of somebody. Oh, and okay, maybe the first like 10 minutes he reminded me of somebody. And then I was like, oh, he reminds me of Miles Teller. He is absolutely Miles Teller.
Well, fun fact.
Miles Teller plays his son in the movie. But I mean, I didn't know until I Googled mid-movie. But I'm watching it, and I'm like, oh, this guy reminds me of Miles Teller. He acts like Miles Teller. Like
Miles Teller's also really tall.
Has the same like beats as him of how he like reacts to things. And I was like, oh my God, like Miles Teller could play him in it today. And then I was like, wait, he was on SNL because he was in Top Gun. And then it wasn't until I saw his son come later on, I was like, oh, okay, so he probably played his son, that it all came full circle. But I was really proud of myself that I was like, dude, this guy reminds me so much of him. And then he turns out to play his son. So well done with the casting department because they are very similar.
I don't think I was thinking that during this. And I knew he was in it. I didn't know who he played, but that totally makes sense, especially now thinking about like just the build and everything. Just seems like he would very much be. I
feel like their like comedic timing is really similar.
His and Meg Ryan's son. I feel like he even kind of looks like a hybrid.
He weirdly does. And then we've kind of touched on this a little bit, like the filming of the fight scenes or like the fighter plane scenes. I had just like a lot of thoughts on them. First of all, as an actor, I feel like it has to be really awkward to film because how do you like, no, you're not actually flying a plane. So you're just sitting in this like little tiny cubby. And is there like an actual cameraman in front of you or is there some kind of like smaller camera? And like, how do you know you have the helmet and the mask, and how do you know where the planes are supposed to be coming from? Because you're probably just sitting in
someone they're just like describing it to you.
Right. And like how to physically act because you're looking around and you're supposed to, I mean, obviously they're probably not pushing buttons because it was a really like close in on their faces. But I feel like that was such like, it must've been an interesting thing to have to film is how to react well in something that you're obviously not physically doing.
Yeah.
But then also the filming of the actual fight scenes. First of all, the perspective was kind of hard for me to follow of like which plane was which and who was going which way.
I need to watch that fight scene or the dog fight like 7 or 8 times to figure out what
and
was
like
going
how
on.
which plane was closer to us and farther away and like above, and I mean different angles, or I'd be like, oh, I definitely know where each plane is in like the field of view. And then one plane would move one way, and I'd be like, okay, maybe that's closer to me than that one. And
but how do you know which plane is like your ally and which one is the enemy in those situations?
Like in real life, how do you do that?
Fast, and I mean, I'm sure they have like different shapes or whatever, but at that speed, that distance, how do you keep track of that?
Yeah, that was, I mean, and thinking of like the real life application of like, okay, people really do this. How do you keep track of everything? And
well, nowadays they have drones that make that decision for you.
Very true. But and then how do you script out for this movie? How do you like, we're gonna have this plane do this and do this and do, like, how do you script all of that out and actually shoot it? And then do you do that first and then do the like actor scenes, or just all of it?
And then they had a bunch of planes fly around. They used that as B-roll, and then they probably just had people sit in a cockpit and do it. I don't think they probably tried to get it as perfect.
Was it, or maybe this one? I mean, obviously, there's probably more CGI in the newer one, but like, were they more like specific about it now? I don't know.
Well, no. In the sequel, I'm sure Tom Cruise flew his own jet.
It's the hill he's gonna die on.
I'm gonna drop into a huge dive while still trying to act.
But I just feel like all that was really interesting from like a cinematography, videography, filming perspective. And then I'm also this quick note, I'm going to do a deep dive into the MPAA ratings for the movies of like what actually PG means and G and PG-13.
How has it changed over time?
Yeah. When do they make changes? I feel like we clearly, don't have a good understanding of what makes something PG.
Yeah.
That I'm going to figure that out for us this week.
Yeah. I feel like kids probably would have just completely ignored most of like the love story on this anyways, and just wanted to like probably zoned out until they
any small boy watching this would have been like, planes, oh my god, like all the other stuff would have been just like, I don't even care. I'm still thinking about this fight scene that happened 20 minutes ago. And then my last note is moody, because once Goose dies, still R.I.P. Just how like the music shifts, and like there's lots of like Tom Cruise like looking moody and like
his eyes all kind of like puffy.
Yep. And like on his motorcycle with the sunset, watching the planes go off. I loved that it was still that like almost like rom-com type, like, oh, something happened, like I'm gonna be really moody about it.
Felt very 80s.
Yes, it felt very 80s, really deep in that 80s feel. Yeah, those are my notes. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So for my first note was, and this happened several times in the movie, especially on the plane, or not, sorry, on the ship. They were so sweaty.
I was going to write a note about it, but I saw that was like your first note, and I knew I didn't need to write
beads of sweat, so much sweat that I still feel like in most movies nowadays, you don't see anyone sweating. They must like blot it all out, or
I don't know how much I would have paid attention to it if you hadn't brought it up last week. But as soon as they were on the ship the first time, I was like, oh, they're so sweaty.
So absolutely, like just pouring down sweat, which I get it. Like you're in a ship, probably not great ventilation in there, a lot of high stakes stuff going on. You're going to be like dripping sweat with all of that. But I just, even when they weren't in those scenes, there were so many other scenes throughout the movie where they were just dripping sweat.
Oh, for sure. It was definitely worse on the ship though.
But in addition to the sweat, he was also just in that small room, all the planes flying around, it's high stakes time, and this guy's just smoking a cigar and just like puffing it in everyone's face. I'm like, that, like, sure, it was the 80s, but wouldn't you be like, I need to put this down so I can totally focus and not ruin everyone else's focus with my cigar breath everywhere?
Yeah.
I wonder, in a closed space.
I mean, I think we grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, and like once like the smoking sections of bars were no more, that like it was so like, oh, you don't do that anymore, oh my gosh, that if it was more just this is just what life is in the 80s.
We're just going to show that he was a big, strong, powerful man. Just
but even all the like other pilots and other people on the plane were like had cigarettes or cigars. The lady in the bar with the pink beret that had her cigar as well.
And I get that when you're like at a bar, but when you're like in a high stakes situation like that, I don't know if I could concentrate on my cigar and like not getting ash everywhere and just definitely
a bold choice.
I found it interesting. like the Cold War feel of this, that we talked about the Nazis being the bad guy in Indiana Jones, and now this was, I assume, the Russians with the kind of the MiGs and everything. That it was also interesting, and they kind of, I guess, mentioned that the Russians denied the incident ever happening at the end when they shot them down. So it didn't kind of escalate like war tensions, because you would think that shooting down several planes would be an act of war and would very much escalate everything that didn't actually escalate that to that extent in the 80s. But I just kind of found it interesting that was the change in the quote unquote bad guy in the movies, and that it actually didn't end up resulting in World War III. Like I think that would have, if it had been kind of like, hey, this country shot down our planes, we're going to escalate. With my list of actors and actresses, I think I'd kind of talked about how I thought Meg Ryan's acting was just absolutely terrible, or like weird accent and her 80s hair. There's a lot of 80s hair in it, but like hers just kind of seemed like it didn't fit her. And
I definit't paid attention to her.
I just imagine there was more of scenes of her maybe in the original script that they might have like cut or something, because it was just not great.
And just for like a little bit of background, we did start this whole like watch a movie every week 6 weeks ish before we started the podcast. So we did watch Sleepless in Seattle and When Harry Met Sally. So we've recently watched
way far back with Meg Ryan.
We've recently watched a lot of Meg Ryan. So to see more, this was.
And I thought she was worse in this than the other.
Yeah, she was not really great in any of. She was okay in When Harry Met Sally. This is definitely the worst of the three.
Yeah, just her character was not great. And I don't know if it was just mostly that, but seemed like could have had anyone also in that role and probably would have done just as good or if not better job.
I did see before I watched the movie that Meg Ryan was in it, and I kind of was expecting her to be
love interest,
the love interest, and there was this other girl, and I was like, oh, maybe Meg Ryan will come in later, and then she comes in as Goose's wife, and I was like, well, never mind, not what I thought.
I wonder if they cast her and then like just didn't like the role, so they tried to minimize it as much as possible, but still wanted her name for like selling the tickets
but
to the movie.
Mid-80s, I'm sure she was a big name for sure.
Got to talk about so much sexual tension between Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer, especially. Just really like when they would talk, it's like their faces had to be like 2 inches apart, and they were just grinning as hard as they could into each other's faces.
And in today's time, I feel like that would easily lead to some kind of like relationship and just like.
Well, when they first see each other in the whatever lecture at Top Gun, it almost had that same vibe as if like most movies where the guy meets the girl and they see lock eyes.
And Tom Cruise keeps looking over his shoulder,
making eyes with it. Yeah. It very much felt like they just really wanted this to be like a love chemistry thing, and they maybe just in the 80s couldn't do that or something. It's like they changed it, but it just felt very much like there was just something there that the actors or the director really wanted to happen, but just didn't.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was like a dude thing where you just like have to like really aggressively get up in the face of the guy that you're trying to like.
Dangerous.
I was like, maybe that like dudes just do this all the time and they just have to like get up in each other's faces, but I don't know. I felt the tension too, for sure.
Yeah, very very tense. I guess I talked about the story blocks feel of all of the just plain fighting and all that going on, but I also kind of felt like it got some vibes of like Power Rangers fight scenes where you see like the Megazord like fighting and doing all these things, and then it would cut to like the Rangers in their own like Zord like talking like, oh my god, he's getting me, and then they cut back to like action scenes.
So I'm gonna be honest and say I read this note during the movie and I didn't really know what you were talking about. But it's before you even started talking here, all of a sudden I was like, I know what he's talking about. It's the up close. Oh, they're clearly not in the place that they say they're in, or this is all like very staged or like
and then also
scaled
like
down.
Cockpit shot of like everything is going crazy, and then all of a sudden shot of like this other where the actual action that you're watching is. It felt like a Power Rangers fight scene there.
I see it for sure. So I really feel like we're gonna have to watch Power Rangers at some point, right? We just keep
the Power Rangers movie for sure.
We keep coming back to
classic.
it. It is. It's very culturally significant.
100%, at least significant to us
for the 90s kids.
Talked about the soundtrack just being absolute fire, just banger after banger after banger. Just
if you want to know what we're going to be listening to in our house this week, it's probably the soundtrack.
I just kind of want to, I mean, obviously not, I've been drinking, just want to go out and get in the Camaro, windows down, and just drive around listening to the soundtrack on blast.
You can go do that after work tomorrow.
It's just, oh man, great soundtrack. Just felt very, very 80s and very much like a very fitting soundtrack for this movie. The love scene that they have, it felt like it was a music video. Like it was very blue, colorized, and it almost felt like they filmed a music video for the "Take My Breath Away" song, and then decided to just interject it with color grading, the same everything, just like throw that into the movie.
I do feel like there was some interesting,
Everything else felt
like
very
color
orange
grade
shifted, except for that scene. Felt very blue shifted.
There was, especially towards the end, like some of the sky shots where the sun was setting. It just had a different vibe than the rest of the movie. Obviously, like action, fighter pilot stuff. But then every once in a while, it's like kind of close to the beach with this like weird sunset, like glow to it. I don't know. It felt like it was a weird balance.
But the sunset glow is very orangey. That this really blue love scene, whatever, just felt very out of place. But felt very much more like a
it did have music video vibes for sure.
I loved the quote they mentioned a couple times, the too close for missiles switching to guns. And I don't know if you remember on Facebook in like the late 2000s, like 2008-ish, maybe even 2000 like to like 2011, at the bottom of the screen they would have like random quotes that when you refreshed it. And one of them was too close for missiles switching to guns. And I remember seeing that for the first time and being like, what is that? And I had to Google it and it was like, oh, right, Top Gun. That every time they see that, I just get that flashback to like the early.
Where was
like,
it on the Facebook?
The very bottom in the footer. Remember, like the top was like the weird, like Mark Zuckerberg, like avatar thing, like stylized, whatever, in like the logo. And at the bottom, they had like randomized quotes. And one of them was I don't remember any of the other ones. I'm sure it's listed somewhere, but the too close for missiles switching to guns.
It's maybe familiar. But it's like annoying how long ago that actually is, and that I feel like I don't really remember.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook has changed obviously so much since then.
So much.
But I love that little quote.
Interesting.
And wasn't this like a 5-week program? It seemed like a lot happened.
I missed the fact that it was 5 weeks. You said that in your description at the beginning, and I was like, I just totally missed.
You're going to Top Gun. It's 5 weeks. Blah blah blah. At the end of it,
I missed that for sure.
So much happens. You know, they have to get there, obviously, do a bunch of the drills, like Goose dies, has to get over it, like finish it. Like it just felt like a lot compressed into a 5-week span.
Yes, but I also see where they have the like the competition for who's the best pilot, that it's not something that's going to be like years and years of
but
stuff.
It seems like so much more of a competition than school.
True. But I also feel like, aren't they trying to like churn people out to like be active, the best of the best?
I mean, what's the point of all of that? Are you just trying to see who's the best to give them a badge and like to have their egos grow further? Or
that's
are you
kind of what I
trying
figured
to
it
take
was.
The top and say, you're going to be our best and you're going to learn from the best that came before you? I don't know. Or is it just kind of like,
I don't get
we're
it.
coming here to see if you actually are as good as everyone says you are, and if so, you're going to get the best missions? I don't know.
I have no clue.
We'll see. I will deep dive that this next week. Yeah. To see like what the real Top Gun experience is actually like. Is it longer than 5 weeks or what? Very interesting that when Goose dies, they didn't have any sort of therapy or any sort of mention of that for Maverick, which makes sense for the times.
For sure.
Nowadays, there'd be a lot of like mandatory, you're grounded. Like,
deep therapy now, for sure.
Like you're not going to get behind air in a cockpit until you've gone to this much therapy, until you can prove that you are flight worthy. To just be like, he's gone through a lot. And the first thing the whatever lead guy says is like, get him in a plane like as soon as possible. Terrible idea.
and
for
they
so
kept
many
saying
reasons.
like keep getting him up there, like keep having him go. And I was like, ooh, seems risky.
Yeah. And like,
especially you're going to put someone else in that plane with him.
I get that mentality for then. I think nowadays there'd be so much more like you need to kind of prove that you are able to get behind a cockpit. It's one thing to be like, you're going to go back into battle or back into the war zone, but to fly a plane like that is a bit more than just like you're going to run out there with your rifle.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to be the guy that fills in for someone who's...
Yeah. How would you like to be the guy in the partner? That'd just be terrifying.
Nope.
And yeah, I think I kind of, that wraps up my notes.
Oh, it was really good. I really liked it.
Yeah. I am so excited to watch the sequel now.
Me too. I mean, I've heard from multiple people who are not big like action people that are like, this movie was really, really good, that I'm now even more excited.
I'm scared though, because I think because everyone has talked about how great it is, that now I'm expecting it to be so great.
And because I liked this so much that I'm like, oh God, I'm going to really let myself down, that I'm really intrigued to watch it. Can we watch it this weekend?
Tonight?
Yeah, you're going to watch this tonight? Sure.
No, I'm just afraid it's going to be like too many throwbacks, or too much like trying to go for the nostalgia, or not believable. But it's gotten a lot of great reviews and said it was done really well. So hoping for the best.
And it has Miles Teller in it. We love
Always
Miles Teller.
A great time.
We love him.
Yeah.
So, but I am really interested to see how Tom Cruise has changed, because I feel like I have not really seen a whole lot of Tom Cruise movies until the last 4 or 5 weeks, that I don't really know a whole lot about him.
Big jump from 1986 to 2022.
Right? That I'm just interested to see, you know, how he is, like what he looks like now, how his acting is. I do feel like his acting was better in this than it was in Risky Business, because you could tell he was still just like a really new like kid in Risky Business. I still feel like there were some things that were a little cringy for me, but to take it all the way to 2022.
I think it was different. I wouldn't necessarily say it was better. It still was just a lot of like, I'm just going to sit there and kind of awkwardly just like smile and chuckle.
Yes. Oh, also one more note that I did want to go back to is I had Tom Cruise, but I got stuck on his eyebrows that I forgot to talk about. How, oh God, I forgot what I was going to say.
His teeth. How I could have landed a jet on those teeth.
You could have landed a jet on his teeth. His character in Risky Business was so like nerd. I don't know if nerdy is the right word, but just like not as cool as I always thought he was going to be in Risky Business, that I don't know that I buy him as this like really tough fighter pilot. Like, even maybe I'm skewed because of that, but just like he seems more like a shy, like reserved kind of guy that I don't know that about.
By the end of Risky Business, he's kind of like gotten a lot more confidence, especially that scene where he's like, well, guess we're going to Illinois or University of Illinois, and he smiles and puts his glasses on and like has that big, I feel like that was very much the character that was then thrust into.
Yeah. I just don't know how much I bought him as this like tough fighter pilot. And maybe that's like skewed by like Tom Cruise and everything he's done in his life and like all that kind of stuff. I don't know. And not watching this in 1986 when it first came out, but obviously we weren't alive then. But
well, there's a lot more Tom Cruise action movies we can watch if you want to get more cultured on just Tom Cruise.
This is not a Tom Cruise podcast. We will watch more, but like not all at once. But yeah, I really enjoyed this week. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been two fun movies back to back, so we'll have to have something less fun next week.
No, I was just about to say, I'm like really nervous. What are we going to watch next week? Is it going to be as good? I hope so.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right.
Well,
until next time.
Yes, fun culture night. Cheers.
Yeah. Catch you next week.